was a quiet August afternoon in Blackstone when Heather Thompson heard a knock at her door. On the porch stood the 10-year-old boy from next door, asking if she could help with a baby that wouldn't stop crying. Heather followed him back to the house. When she stepped inside, she immediately knew something was wrong. The air was thick and sour. Trash and dirty clothes covered the floors. Piles of diapers and bags blocked her path. And on a bed in one of the rooms, she saw the baby, just months old, covered in feces, crying, with no adult in sight. In another room, she noticed a small child, equally neglected, moving through the chaos. Shaken, Heather backed out and called the police. What she had just discovered was only the beginning of a story that would shock an entire town. Blackstone, Massachusetts, is a small town on the border of Rhode Island. Streets lined with modest homes, quiet yards, and families who know each other by name. On the surface, it's the kind of place where neighbors leave their doors unlocked and kids play outside until dinner. The house on St. Paul Street looked like any other. A simple 2-story home, paint peeling in places, grass a little overgrown. Nothing about it suggested the chaos that would soon be uncovered inside. No one walking by could have imagined what was happening behind those walls. A house where children lived in filth, hidden from the world, and where tragedies were quietly piling up, unnoticed for years. To the people of Blackstone, it was just another house. But soon, that normal neighborhood would become the center of a case that would shake the community to its core. Within minutes of Heather Thompson's call, police officers arrived at the house on St. Paul Street. They had no idea what they were walking into. Just another welfare check, routine on paper. But something about this call felt different. The officers stepped inside, and the air hit them first. Thick, sour, impossible to ignore. The floor was buried under piles of trash and dirty clothes. Diapers stacked in corners. Bags and debris blocked much of the space, forcing them to navigate carefully just to move through the rooms. And then they saw the children. Young kids, barely clothed, crawling and walking through the mess. Some were covered in dirt and grime. One baby was crying on a bed, neglected, obviously malnourished, with no adult in sight. It was immediately clear to the officers this was no ordinary welfare check. This was a home in crisis. A home where children had been living in squalor for months, maybe years. And they were only beginning to see the full picture. As officers moved deeper into the house, the full scale of the neglect became impossible to ignore. Every room told the same story. Garbage piled high, rotting food on counters, and soiled diapers scattered across the floors. Clothes and trash were everywhere, blocking pathways and making it difficult to walk without stepping on something unspeakable. The smell was overpowering, a mixture of decay, urine, and filth that filled every corner. In the bedrooms, makeshift beds were soaked and filthy. Toys, when they existed at all, were buried beneath debris. It was a chaotic, suffocating environment, and the children were living in it as if it were normal. Officers found a baby on a bed, crying, covered in feces. In another room, a small child moved through the filth, wide-eyed and wary. It was immediately clear that these kids had been left alone in these conditions for far too long, and that this house was hiding horrors far beyond what anyone had expected. When they answered the call, as officers worked through the chaos of the house, they were led upstairs to a bedroom that had been closed off. What they found inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. In the closet, hidden in cardboard boxes, were the remains of infants. 2 were dressed in diapers and clothing, carefully folded inside the boxes. A third had more evidence that suggested it may have been born alive. It was a horrifying discovery, and it instantly changed the scope of the investigation. This was no longer just a case of neglect. It was a situation involving deaths that had been deliberately concealed, hidden from the world in a house that from the outside had looked perfectly ordinary. The surviving children, already traumatized by the conditions of the home, were quickly removed. But the scale of what had been hidden upstairs left everyone involved reeling. The house on St. Paul Street had become a place of unimaginable tragedy. Erika Murray was 31 years old at the time. She had lived in Blackstone for years, keeping mostly to herself. Neighbors described her as quiet, reclusive, someone who rarely left the house and didn't socialize much. On the outside, she appeared ordinary, a mother with several children, managing her own life the way she knew how. But behind closed doors, life looked very different. Murray had 7 children, including the 3 infants who would later be found hidden upstairs. The surviving children were young, some toddlers, living in squalor and isolation. For years, the household had been largely shut off from the outside world. Friends and extended family had little contact, and no one noticed the warning signs that were mounting inside the home. Murray's life was one of isolation, mental health struggles, and overwhelming responsibility. The chaos inside her house reflected the challenges she faced every day, challenges that, tragically, her children bore the brunt of. Erika Murray lived with her boyfriend, Raymond Rivera, who was in his early 30s at the time. Rivera mostly stayed in the basement, keeping to himself, and claimed he was largely unaware of the conditions in the home. Neighbors rarely saw him interacting with the children, and his presence in the household was minimal compared to Murray's day-to-day role as caretaker. Most significantly, the infant remains were carefully collected and analyzed. Medical examiners looked for evidence of live birth, timing, and cause of death, while investigators traced pregnancies, trying to understand how many had occurred and why they had gone unnoticed. Every piece of evidence, from the mess on the floor to the remains upstairs, became a crucial part of the case. It painted a picture of a household marked by secrecy, isolation, and neglect, and laid the groundwork for the legal battle that would follow. Once the investigation was complete, the case moved into the courtroom. Erika Murray was charged with multiple counts, including assault and cruelty to children, endangerment, and concealing the deaths of her infants. Raymond Rivera faced charges as well, though his involvement was considered more limited. The prosecution presented the evidence gathered from the house, the conditions of the surviving children, and the medical examinations of the infant remains. They argued that Murray had knowingly neglected her children and concealed the deaths of her infants, creating a household where harm and death could occur unnoticed. The defense painted a different picture, emphasizing Murray's mental health struggles, her isolation, and the challenges she faced managing a large household largely cut off from outside help. They argued that while the conditions were unquestionably poor, proving intentional harm, especially in regard to the infants, would be difficult. During the trial, one of the most difficult questions for the prosecution was proving whether any of the infants had been born alive. Medical examiners could not definitively establish live birth in each case, and without that proof, a murder charge could not hold. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and legal arguments, the court delivered its verdict. Erika Murray was acquitted of murder charges related to the infant deaths, due largely to the inability to prove live birth and intentional harm. However, she was found guilty on multiple counts of assault and cruelty to children. The court recognized the severe neglect the surviving children had suffered, and the harm caused by the unsafe and unsanitary conditions in the home. The verdict was met with mixed reactions in the community. Some felt justice had been served through the guilty findings on child cruelty, while others struggled with the unanswered questions surrounding the infants' deaths. The case highlighted the complexities of prosecuting situations where neglect, isolation, and tragedy collide. Following the verdict, the court moved to sentencing. Erika Murray was handed a prison term for her convictions on assault and cruelty to children. The judge took into account the severity of the neglect, the impact on the surviving children, and Murray's mental health and isolation when determining the length and conditions of the sentence. Raymond Rivera received a separate sentence, reflecting his limited involvement in the household and the charges he faced. The house on St. Paul Street is gone, but the questions it left behind remain. How can a mother abandon her kids like that in a filthy house? How long could this have gone if the neighbors didn't notice it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like deep dives into disturbing crimes like this, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you with the next case.